Hello, welcome to a short screencast on recording digital audio. Okay, one of the first things you have to consider is to choose the right type of microphone. They come in lots of different shapes and sizes, handheld, on a boom pole, stuck to your clothing. Some of them require power, so you must have factored that into the recording scenario, and some don't. Some can just run from batteries. And lots of them have different types of connectors, so you need to understand, is it going to be able to connect to the item that we're recording into. Let's have a look at some of the factors. How is your event being recorded? Do you intend to be up close to the speaker or the sound source, or would you like to capture the whole room? Or maybe it's going to be single speakers, each taking their turns at the lectern, or maybe you'd like to record everyone's voice simultaneously and then edit it back into a single package. Also, where is the event being recorded? What kind of resources are available to you, and how can you record it? What's the size and shape of the room or the place where you're at? And also grasping this idea of being on or off mic. So the simplest way to describe this is, imagine you're in a Q&A setting. Quite often you'll hear the speakers, the panel speakers, have been mic'd up, but the audience has a roving microphone. So occasionally you'll hear someone who asks their question well before the microphone gets to them, and you can faintly hear it on the recording, but then they have to repeat it onto the microphone, obviously. That's an example of being both on mic and off mic. So let's have a look at pickup patterns, and this is really directly related to being on and off mic. Here's some examples. So first one is a shotgun, and you can see it's got a very long, thin, narrow oval that it picks up. You can really direct it onto the sound source. And the second one is a lavalier mic, or something that you can clip onto the clothing. Again, you can be very close to the speaker's mouth. The USB desk mic there is great for a situation where you've got a controlled environment, say in your office, and it gives a good natural pickup, and you can record two people at once as well. And the little Zoom audio recorder is a similar kind of example, where it's got a stereo crossed pair. Gives a very authentic recording. There's a little dictaphone that really works best when it's handheld, up close to the mouth, or just sitting on a desk capturing the whole room, where the quality of the audio recording isn't so much an issue as the fact that it is being recorded. And then a microphone headset, another example. They're not all the examples, but that's visually showing you how the pickup pattern changes between different types. Consider the recording location now. If you're indoors, you might first want to consider, what is the timbre of the sound of the room? This is sometimes called the colour of the sound, or a way of describing how does it sound. Sound recordists use these phrases, dead or live. Is it dead or is it live? So a live sound is a very hollow, ringing sound, as you'd see in a church hall, where someone walking across there with hard heels, you'd very prominently hear that clack, 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 and that echo around the room. If the same person walked into the cosy lounge room with lots of soft furnishings and drapes, you would barely hear their footsteps at all. So one's an example of live and one's an example of dead. And it's caused really by this concept of sound reflection. It's not an echo as such, as in when you're yodeling down a canyon, but it is a short echo, and controlling it is the process of baffling or deadening. So think about where you're recording. You may have some easy things that you can do to improvise and fix up or optimize the recording location to make it just sound that little bit better. So for instance, if you're doing a bit of voiceover, maybe you could rearrange the furniture in the room a bit and talk into the corner of the room where you can trap your voice, and you could hang a few blankets or towels over a chair. Or maybe if you really wanted to get a great dead sound, it sounds a bit goofy, but you can empty a few clothes out of a closet and you can record inside the closet. So you've got a very small space where your voice is being captured by all those hanging clothes. A little bit unusual, but those are the kind of things that you find they're ready to improvise with, and will greatly improve the sound of your recording. What about outdoors? It's a different situation. A lot of the times you'll be trying to manage wind and rain. if you're in an outdoor setting. So you can use something called a dead cat, which is just basically a big furry covering for a microphone. It's also called a windscreen, which is just the foam covering. That reduces the wind noise coming directly onto the microphone. If it's raining, then just got to be under an umbrella or under a covered area, otherwise you will hear that pitter-pat landing on the microphone very prominently on the recording. So what about contextual noise? Well, sometimes you want to completely eradicate it so that you really want as little of it as possible, so you can reduce it. Say for instance you're outdoors and you're in a noisy environment, you might just choose to pick up and move to another place altogether with the person that you're interviewing, or perhaps you're making a musical recording. But you might also want to include it. So imagine you're trying to get the atmosphere and sound of a market or a crowd at an event. Then you might want to also, as well as recording interviews with people specifically, you might want to also record atmospheric sound, so that later on when you're post-producing you can have a bit of extra sound to play with. And lastly, talk briefly about performance. So the way to think of this is, how does your voice sound? What kind of pace and energy do you want your recording to sound like? And this is the instance where you're recording audio for making audio recordings for your students. How would you like your sound to come across? Do you modulate your voice at all? So for instance, do you put on your radio voice? Part of making a good quality recording is thinking about removing the ums and ahs and trying to eradicate as much as possible the breathing and the clicking of the voice and the gulping and the swallowing sounds. And so doing it repeatedly and having a bit of practice about modulating your voice, basically putting on your radio voice, is how you manage that part of the process. And what's your preferred style of speaking? So if you look at those three options there, you can see they're quite different. Conversational means that you know your material, and if you're talking with someone, say a single person or a panel of people, you know your material, you just want to get the conversation going and flowing, and you're quite happy for it to sound that way because really that's how people are going to respond best to you. Or maybe if you're making something which is instructional in its nature, you want to be quite tightly scripted, which means that you've got to block out your sentences, time them out, make them crisp, clean, succinct. Or maybe you just want to follow some bullet points, which is sort of halfway between the two, I guess. Thanks for watching.